Marcus Whitfield sat at his usual corner table in the Grand Azure restaurant, the same place he dined every Tuesday evening for the past 3 years. At 58, he'd built Whitfield Industries from nothing into a manufacturing empire, but success had cost him everything that mattered. The chandeliers cast a warm glow across the elegant dining room. Marcus loosened his tie and picked up the wine glass before him. It had been another brutal day of board meetings and difficult decisions. 200 jobs would be cut by Friday. The weight of it pressed on his chest. A young waitress with blonde hair pulled back approached his table. She couldn't have been more than 25. Her name tag read Sophie. She'd served before, always quiet and efficient. But tonight, something was different. As she leaned forward to refill his water glass, her hand trembled. She slipped a folded napkin onto the table, her blue eyes darting nervously toward the bar. Marcus glanced down. Written in hurried handwriting were 4 words that made his blood run cold. "Don't drink it and leave now." His fingers froze on the stem of the wine glass. He looked up at Sophie sharply. Her face had gone pale, and she was already backing away, her whole body rigid with fear. Marcus had not built a fortune by ignoring his instincts. Something in her eyes told him this was not a joke. As Sophie turned to walk away, he reached out and gently caught her wrist. Not forcefully, but firmly enough to stop her. "Wait," he said quietly, his voice low so nearby diners wouldn't hear. "What's going on?" Sophie's eyes filled with tears. Her voice came out as barely a whisper. "Please, sir, just trust me. Leave the wine and go. Right now." Marcus felt his heart pounding. He glanced at the glass of deep red wine, then back at her terrified face. "Tell me why," he said, still holding her wrist gently. "I need to know." Sophie's lower lip quivered. She glanced again toward the bar, where a heavy-set man in a black suit stood watching them with cold eyes. The man's hand rested inside his jacket. "My brother," Sophie whispered, her voice cracking. "He owes money to very bad people. They said if I didn't help them, they'd kill him. They told me to put something in your drink. I couldn't do it. I just couldn't." The words hung in the air between them like a confession that could not be taken back. Marcus released her wrist slowly. His mind raced through the implications. Corporate espionage? Ransom? Revenge from a competitor? It didn't matter now. "How much does your brother owe?" he asked. Sophie shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. $30,000. But that's not your problem. You need to leave before they realize I warned you. Marcus made a decision in that moment that surprised even himself. Perhaps it was because she reminded him of his own daughter, who he hadn't spoken to in 5 years after their falling out. Perhaps it was because someone had finally shown him genuine kindness in a world that had become cold and transactional. "Come with me," he said, standing up from the table. "Right now." "What?" "No, I can't." "Either we both leave, or neither of us do," Marcus said firmly. He pulled out his phone and quickly dialed his head of security. "I need you at the Grand Azure immediately. Threat level red." Sophie's eyes widened. "What are you doing?" "Saving both our lives," Marcus said. He took her arm gently and guided her toward the front entrance, deliberately leaving the wine untouched on the table. The man at the bar straightened up, his hand moving inside his jacket. Marcus walked faster, keeping Sophie close beside him. They burst through the front doors into the cool evening air just as Marcus's black SUV screeched to a halt at the curb. His security chief, a former Marine named Davidson, jumped out. "Get in." Davidson barked, scanning the street with professional efficiency. Marcus helped Sophie into the back seat and climbed in after her. Davidson slid behind the wheel, and the vehicle surged forward. Sophie was shaking uncontrollably now, the adrenaline and fear finally overwhelming her. "It's all right," Marcus said softly. "You're safe now. Tell me everything about your brother." Over the next hour, as they sat in Marcus's private office on the 42nd floor, Sophie told him the whole story. Her younger brother Danny had gotten mixed up with a loan shark after losing his job. The debt had spiraled out of control. The criminals had threatened to kill him unless Sophie helped them poison Marcus Whitfield, whose business dealings had apparently cost them money. Marcus listened without interrupting, his weathered face thoughtful. When she finished, he made 3 phone calls. The first was to his lawyer. The second was to a friend in the FBI. The third was to a rehabilitation center he'd donated to years ago. "Danny will be safe by morning," Marcus said when he hung up. "The men who threatened you will be in custody, and the debt is paid." Sophie stared at him in disbelief. "Why would you do this for us? You don't even know me." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "Because 30 years ago, I had a daughter who needed help, and I was too busy building an empire to notice. By the time I looked up from my desk, she was gone. She doesn't speak to me anymore." He paused, his eyes distant with regret. "Tonight, a brave young woman risked her life to save mine. Even though doing nothing would have been easier, she chose courage over fear. Kindness over survival. That's worth more than all the money I've made." Sophie wiped her tears away. "Thank you doesn't seem like enough." "Then don't thank me," Marcus said with a sad smile. "Just promise me you'll help someone else someday when they need it. That's how we make the world better. One small act of courage at a time." 3 months later, Marcus sat in that same corner table at the Grand Azure. But things had changed. He'd restructured the layoffs at his company, finding alternatives that saved most of those jobs. He'd started volunteering at a youth center on weekends. And he'd written a letter to his daughter, not asking for forgiveness, just telling her he finally understood what mattered. Sophie brought his dinner, smiling warmly. Her brother Danny was 6 weeks sober and working as a mechanic. The men who'd threatened them were serving federal prison time. "How's your evening going, Mr. Whitfield?" she asked. "Better than I deserve," he said honestly, "but I'm working on earning it." As Sophie walked away, Marcus looked down at his plate and felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Gratitude, not for what he had, but for what he'd almost lost and for the courage of a young woman who'd reminded him that some things matter more than power or profit or pride. Sometimes salvation comes not from grand gestures, but from a simple note slipped across a table by someone brave enough to risk everything for a stranger. And sometimes that changes everything. If this story touched your heart, please share, and subscribe for more meaningful stories. Leave a comment below about a time when someone's small act of kindness changed your life. Your story might inspire someone else today.